British graduates are getting screwed with tens of thousands in debt and paying punishing interest rates. The student loan system is clearly not working, and the mainstream media is waking up.
This chart we've got now shows the difference between annual loan repayments made by students and the amount of interest added to those loans each year. So essentially, this is a kind of snapshot of the progress students are making on paying down their debt each year. The amount that they've paid off in blue and the amount of interest that they've been seen added to their loan balance in red. Well, in the period to 2016-17, we saw these change quite significantly because in 2012, there was a new repayment plan called Plan 2 that was brought in. This was brought in to coincide with tuition fees going up to £9,000. And Plan 2 said that students had to repay their loan at an interest rate of inflation plus 3%. So these first new repayment plans came in for students in 2016-17. Let's zoom out and see what has happened to this balance since then. And you will see that the amount of interest added to student loan balances each year relative to the amount they are paying down has absolutely soared, trapping students from the period of 2012 to 2023 who were on this special repayment plan in their student loans. Clearly, way more being added to how much they owe than how much they're able to pay off each year.
That's a really crazy chart. So last year, for people on these loans, £15 billion was added in interest while only £5 billion was paid off, which is crazy. This terrible deal is specifically for people who started university between 2012 and 2023. So they were the cohort, or the first cohort to pay £9,000 a year. And the interest rates they're paying is crazy. So it's RPI inflation, which is already the higher form of inflation, plus up to 3%, depending on how much you earn. So that's the Plan 2 people. Now, for comparison, I was the cohort just before that. So my fees were £3,000. The interest on my debt is capped at RPI inflation. I still owe £22,000. I checked yesterday while I was looking at this story. 15 years on, which is more than the £18,000 I would have taken out in total. But I can't complain. Apparently, some people have it worse. If I was 3 years younger, I would owe even more. Oliver Gardner from the campaign group Rethink Repayment said this to the Times newspaper. High interest rates on student loan balances mean that many graduates feel they will never realistically pay them off. They will be burdened with much higher marginal tax rates for most of their working lives, even after they have paid back the principal of the loan. Now, that point about marginal tax rates is the important thing to understand, because the good thing about student loans in the UK compared to, say, the United States is they can't make you bankrupt, right? You only pay them back if you are earning. But the issue is that the marginal rate at 9% is very high. So that means that on every pound above the threshold, you pay 9p, an extra 9p in tax. And this is a bigger problem because the point at which it kicks in, the threshold, has been repeatedly frozen. And it's now reached the point that by 2030, graduates will be paying an extra 9% tax on anything they earn above the minimum wage. So I was always, when I took out the loan, I always thought, well, when I'm earning that much money, it won't matter if I'm paying 9%, but it's now going to be, it's converging with the minimum wage. And just let that sink in. So an extra 9% tax on everything above minimum wage. That's huge. Now, imagine if Rachel Reeves announced that income tax was going to be raised by 9p in the pound for everyone. Just like, okay, we're going to have a 9p raise to income tax. There would be absolute uproar, right? The right-wing press would howl that work no longer paid and that people will stop doing overtime. No one's going to try get promoted. Productivity is going to collapse. We'd also have economists warning that by sucking all that money out of the economy, this would push us into recession. It's an incredibly contractionary thing to do to increase income tax by 9%. But for any graduate under the age of around 37, so that's the first cohort to pay £3,000 a year, that's already the reality.
I graduated 6 years ago, and when I graduated, I had just shy of £43,000 of debt, and I checked yesterday and I've now got £57,000. I'm paying a few £100s a month towards mine, but I checked last financial year I paid over £4,000 in debt, in interest. So the amount I owe is just going up and up and up.
So you're paying hundreds of pounds a month and your loan is going up.
Yeah, it's the only loan in the world. Like if you had a loan with the bank and you paid it off, obviously the amount you owe would decrease. And as it currently stands, I'll still be paying this debt by the time I'm in my 50s, which is absolutely insane.
Would you have still gone to university if you'd known that you'd have this debt? Would you have done anything different?
No, I think I would have explored other avenues. But in my school, certainly, they said, oh, you won't really notice the repayments. It's just the way the system works.
Times article that we quoted from earlier, graduates need to be earning about £66,000 before they start actually tackling the debt and not just the interest. So anyone on this plan 2 who is earning below £66,000, their interest payments are more than what they're paying down their principal. The lady there suggested that people might stop going to university because of this. Should they?
I mean, look, there are lots of other ways that you can become successful without going to university, right? Which is why I'm a big advocate for university degrees not being a prerequisite for jobs in which they're not necessarily relevant, right? Which we still see happening. But people should not be unable to go to university because they're going to get themselves into tens and tens of thousands of pounds of debt. And so, I think as that interviewee said, this could become an issue of social mobility. I think it is an issue of social mobility. And as we know, social mobility is a huge challenge in this country and has been getting worse for years. I was looking today at a 2023 report from the Institute of Fiscal Studies, which said that when that report was done in 2023, social mobility was at its lowest in 50 years in the UK. Now, I'm not saying that that abolishing tuition fees solves everything, right? Because I said that in Ireland, we abolished tuition fees in 1996. There have been studies done that showed that it wasn't like a panacea, right? Because there are still problems at the secondary level when it comes to people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds getting the results that they need to get into university. But God, it would help if there were no tuition fees. And, I think we all remember that in 2020, Keir Starmer actually pledged to abolish tuition fees. I don't think the Keir Starmer of today would be quite so keen to do that. But something needs to be done. Something needs to be changed because this is a huge problem. And I think the Sky clip has gone viral. And, I hope that people keep talking about this and the media keeps talking about this because it actually seems to me like kind of an emergency, right? And the way to, look, let's not criticize young people and students for eating avocado toast. Like, let's stop taxing education.
Yeah. The universities actually, I think, don't want free education because then they're worried that if it's directly funded by the government, they're not going to be as well funded as they currently are. But then there is a whole argument that maybe we don't need these universities, which are super competitive and can compete with Harvard. And actually, we want them just to be normal teaching institutions. I want to get up a timeline of UK tuition fees because it's, I suppose, interesting how quickly it's changed. So in 1998, Labour introduced means-tested fees of £1,000 per year. So before that, it was free. 2004, the Higher Education Act permitted universities to charge up to £3,000, and that began in 2006. So that's the one I'm paying. And then in 2012, fees were raised to £9,000. So that's the one I was protesting against. And then I suppose an important thing to note is that the Plan 2 people, they have this really shitty deal when it comes to interest, but their debt will get wiped after 30 years. So it's 30 years of paying an extra 9% income tax. They've changed it now. So I think they're called Plan 5 now. The people who start university after 2023, their interest rates are going to be a bit more capped, which is good. But the bad for them is that they're going to have to keep paying them for 40 years. So theirs won't get wiped out until they're pretty much a pensioner. So that's an extra 9% tax for the rest of their lives. Just some alternatives where in Scotland, Ireland, you're saying lots of Europe universities is free or low cost. The United States, the worst model, you take out private loans, which can make you bankrupt. Australia seems to be the most similar to ours, but again, they don't charge interest on the loan at all. So people are a bit less pissed off about it there. I'm sure if you meet in Australia, they're also somewhat pissed off about it.